Our main character, known as the Baskerville family's Hound, Vikir von Baskerville, had faced a terrible fate. Wrongly accused and sentenced to death by guillotine, he had been loyal to his family. As he stood there, moments away from the cold, unforgiving blade, he vowed that if he ever got a second chance at life, he wouldn't be a hound again. But now, as he opened his eyes, Vikir found himself in a strange and unsettling place. His body felt heavy, and the surroundings were completely unfamiliar. He couldn't help but wonder if he had ended up in hell. In this eerie setting within the grand estate of the Baskerville family, babies were scattered throughout the room, crying and making all sorts of noises. A man entered, the patriarch of the family, and he commented callously that these babies were insignificant, referring to them as trash. As the man strolled through the room, he noticed that one baby, Vikir, remained strangely silent compared to the others. He ordered the servants to bring the babies to a strange cradle-like contraption, and they obeyed without question. Vikir, who had once been known as Vikir, recognized this man as the main culprit behind his previous life's death, Hugo Le Baskerville. Seeing Hugo's younger self, Vikir couldn't help but think back to his own past life as a hound. Born into an illegitimate family, Vikir had been raised in a harsh environment where hounds were trained to carry out missions that included assassination, intelligence, ambushes, and other dark tasks. Hounds were essentially the ones who took care of the dirty work so that the Baskervilles could maintain their position as the most powerful among the 7 families. Vikir had remained loyal to the Baskervilles because he desperately wanted their acknowledgement. But 10 years after the demons had been defeated and the gates to the demonic world had been closed, the reward for Vikir's loyalty had been his own execution. He knew too much. Clenching his tiny fists in his new baby body, Vikir swore he would never live that life again. He wanted revenge, but in his fragile baby state, he was helpless. Frustration bubbled up within him as he rolled around angrily. Then it hit him. To become strong, he needed to seize the opportunity offered by the Cradle of Swords. This trial, mandatory for every Baskerville child, involved navigating a maze to reach the Styx River. The legendary river had the power to turn children's bodies into iron, but its effects were limited to a select number of children. Vikir remembered the fastest route to the river, a straight path out of the helix-shaped wall of blades. He crawled past the swords, determined to change his fate this time. Men watched as Vikir dunked himself into the Styx River, determined to keep the power it offered all to himself for as long as possible. The MC began to sink deeper into the river, feeling the icy water seeping into his wounds. Despite the pain, being in the water had its advantages. He covered his mouth to endure, determined to stay below as long as he could. Amidst the swirling currents, 2 servants on the riverbank shouted for the MC to resurface. Hugo, watching the scene unfold, simply laughed. Curious about the passage of time, he turned to Barrymore, the head butler, and inquired how much time had passed. Barrymore informed him that approximately 7 minutes had gone by, to which Hugo found amusement, suggesting that the MC might not survive. Hugo called out to the struggling MC, urging him to come out of the water. Ignoring Hugo's calls, the MC continued to absorb the river's power with all his might. He lost control, his eyes turning white as he endured excruciating pain before finally blacking out. Hugo, holding the MC by the foot, remarked that staying in the river had been enough for the baby, even hinting that he had drunk its water. Hugo then noticed that the MC had already grown teeth. Curious about the child's name, Hugo asked Barrymore, who revealed it was Vikir. With a smile, Hugo proclaimed the MC's name, signifying the birth of a very ambitious son, eager for revenge and determined to make the Baskerville family vanish into history. As Vikir grew older, he was known as a genius by the age of 8, although his family considered him normal. At 20, he undertook missions involving assassination, espionage, and conquest. By the time he reached 29, he realized the limits of his swordsmanship compared to the family's direct lineage. At 30, the demonic realm gate opened, marking the start of the demon's clan invasion. Over the years, he endured the era of destruction, bravely battling and slaying countless monsters. At 39, the war finally came to an end, with humanity emerging victorious. Before we continue, take a moment to answer the question of the day. What type of bending, water bending, etc. is the best? Comment down below for a chance to be shouted out. Now back to the recap. At 40 years old, Vikir was finally rewarded for his loyalty. The reward is defamation, false accusation, and guillotine's blade. In a dimly lit room, Vikir opens his eyes, gazing at a ceiling decorated with playful, colorful stars. He realizes it's a nursery and his heart races with excitement. This meant he had absorbed the power of the Styx River. His eyes gleam with triumph. A servant tiptoes in, her footsteps soft against the wooden floor. She places a mysterious box in a crib, whispering in confusion, Why would the madam give such a thing? Vikir, curious and cautious, watches the box open. A chill runs down his spine as a dark, sinuous figure emerges. It's two vipers, known as the Bloody Mamba. His mind races, understanding this is a deadly gift from the madam. Few in the family earned that title, and her intentions were always cloaked in mystery. The vipers hiss menacingly, but Vikir's reaction is swift and fearless. He grabs them, his eyes wide with a mix of thrill and vengeance. He feels like a hunter confronting his prey, determined to bring down the Baskervilles, the family he despises. As he strangles the vipers, his hands stained with their blood, he imagines toppling the family with these same hands. The next morning, the nursery is a shocking scene. The crib is stained with blood, and the dead vipers lay around. In the midst of this chaos, Vikir sleeps peacefully, a stark contrast to the violence around him. The servants are horrified, and blame falls on the nannies. They face a grim fate, yet the true reason behind the viper attack remains a mystery to everyone but Vikir. 8 years later, Vikir sits in a classroom, the teacher's voice echoing around him. He talks about swordsmanship levels, from beginners to experts, and then to swordmasters like Sir Hugo of the Baskervilles. The children listen in awe, but Vikir is deep in thought. He needs to regain his strength from his past life before his coming-of-age ceremony. The teacher notices Vikir's distraction, but also his potential. He comments on Vikir's extraordinary abilities, his quick learning, and his physical strength from surviving the Styx River. The teacher knows the patriarch will be pleased with such talent. As Vikir pondered the challenge of confronting Hugo, the notorious Baskerville Trident triplets, high, middle, and low, fixed their gaze on him. They shoved Vikir, tauntingly calling him Garbage Van. These triplets were notorious in the Baskerville household, and they had heard all about Vikir's miraculous 7 minutes in the Styx River and his infant encounter with deadly vipers. Their curiosity mixed with disdain drew them to him. Vikir, maintaining his composure, remembered these three vividly. In his previous life, they were the traitors who had stabbed him amidst his escape from false accusations. Now, in this life, they confronted him, driven by envy and skepticism. They provocatively demanded Vikir to stop his alleged lies, expressing their dislike openly. Vikir, foreseeing trouble with them in the future, decided it was time to establish his dominance. High, emboldened, and sneering, held a knife to Vikir, challenging his rumored invulnerability. They wanted to test if his extended exposure to the Styx River had indeed made his body impervious to blades. Lo, with a sinister grin, covered Vikir's mouth, threatening to eat his hand if Vikir could endure for 3 minutes without breathing. Vikir, understanding their malicious intent, played along, biding his time. As the first minute passed, High and Middle started doubting the rumors of Vikir's supernatural resilience. But as 3 minutes turned into 10, their doubt transformed into stunned silence. They hadn't expected Vikir to withstand such a test so effortlessly. When they finally released him, a jarring crunch echoed through the room. Lo screamed, his hand bleeding profusely. Vikir, his face smeared with blood, grinned malevolently, reminding them of their earlier vow. Middle and Low stood frozen, terror-stricken, while High was forced to confront the reality of Vikir's rumored powers. In a frantic attempt to regain control, High lunged at Vikir, stabbing him in the stomach. To his dismay, the knife failed to penetrate. Vikir, with an air of superiority, reminded them that in the Baskerville clan, age was insignificant compared to power and talent. With a swift motion, Vikir twisted High's hand, his eyes gleaming with a predatory intensity. He dared them to prolong their twisted game. High, writhing in agony, conceded the truth of the rumors. Just before Vikir's fist met his face in a brutal punch, Middle tried to step in, but Vikir effortlessly kicked him aside, his strength and agility on full display. High lay on the ground, his face a mess of broken teeth and a bleeding nose, while Middle and Low stood in utter shock, realizing they had grossly underestimated Vikir's formidable power and resilience. "Get wrecked, son." Low, his face a mask of shock and disbelief, stumbled to the ground, grappling with the reality of their situation. Victor, with a calm yet ominous tone, reassured him that his wounds would heal soon enough with proper treatment. However, he issued a stern warning as he picked up the knife from the floor. He declared that none of them would leave the room, insisting that they had to endure the pain and discomfort of their own making. As he brandished the knife, Vikir offered a chilling proposition. He gave them a choice. One of them could leave the room. The brothers, clutching their wounds, looked at each other in desperation. The knife was tossed among them, and Vikir's voice echoed, urging them to decide quickly among themselves. With blood-red eyes and a menacing grin, Vikir's voice lingered in the air as he exited the room, expressing his impatience and a hint of twisted excitement. He suggested, almost mockingly, that at least one of them should survive. As the door closed behind Vikir, the triplets were left in a state of shock, but soon their desperation turned into aggression. Sounds of fighting and yelling erupted from behind the door. A cacophony of chaos as Vikir stood outside, listening with a satisfied smile. The united front of the Trident of Baskerville was crumbling. Meanwhile, Barrymore reported to Hugo about another bloody incident involving the Moore clan and the Ruby Mines. Hugo saw an opportunity for future negotiations, but his attention was quickly diverted to a new report. Vikir had topped the written exam. Hugo smiled with satisfaction, inquiring about the upcoming practical exam. Barrymore informed him that the Guardian Knights had departed to prepare, leaving the fortress vacant. He then detailed the gruesome aftermath of the fight between the young masters. High had lost all his teeth, Middle's jaw was shattered, and Lou's left index finger was amputated. Though they had physically recovered, their mental states were deeply affected. Hugo was taken aback by the news of the triplets' infighting, as they had always been close. Barrymore revealed Vikir's involvement, causing Hugo to become deeply concerned. In the next scene, Vikir stood before Hugo and Barrymore, respectfully addressing Hugo as the Patriarch. Hugo, addressing Vikir, expressed his intrigue and perhaps a hint of admiration at how Vikir had single-handedly dismantled the unity of the triplets. Vikir responded, his voice steady and unapologetic, confirming that the triplets had indeed received proper medical care. Hugo, reflecting on their current state, noted that their hearts were disabled. The triplets, once inseparable, no longer ate or spoke together, their famed combination technique effectively destroyed. A faint smile played on Vikir's lips, a silent testament to his handiwork. Hugo, probing deeper, questioned whether it was wrong for Vikir to have reduced his brothers to such a state. Vikir's reply was simple yet profound. He was merely stronger. He posed a philosophical question, wondering if the stronger person is ever in the wrong. Hugo, intrigued by this perspective, shared a personal anecdote. He recalled how the youngest daughter of a family ruined by the Baskervilles had paid him a visit. She had become a nun and offered him forgiveness. As Vikir echoed Hugo's thoughts on forgiveness, his eyes glowed a deep red. He stated that forgiveness was merely an excuse for the weak, who lacked the strength to seek revenge. Hugo's face lit up with a wide smile, pleased with Vikir's understanding. He recited the family motto, "Only the strong will reign supreme. Weakness is a sin." As a reward for his actions and insights, Hugo granted Vikir permission to take any snack from the food storage, limited only by what he could carry. Vikir's face brightened at the mention of chocolate, his favorite treat. He thanked Hugo respectfully for the reward, and as he turned to leave, Hugo called him son, expressing his expectations for Vikir in the upcoming interim evaluation. Although inwardly disgusted by Hugo's words, Vikir politely agreed. Barrymore then introduced Vikir to a renowned chocolate favored by the Morgue clan. It was a luxury item, difficult to obtain. However, Vikir declined the offered delicacy, requesting instead cacao beans with a rich aroma. The chefs in Barrymore were puzzled by this unusual request. They presented him with purple-colored cacao beans, known as bloody beans, each capable of producing 100 liters of chocolate. Vikir tasted them and was taken aback by their bitter taste. Barrymore mused to himself, impressed by Vikir's unique approach to securing chocolate despite the Patriarch's restrictions, believing it to be a testament to Vikir's brilliance and his deep love for chocolate. The chef, curious about Vikir's intentions with the beans, offered to process them. Vikir, however, declined and decided to take the beans as they were. Barrymore was left wondering about Vikir's peculiar tastes, but unbeknownst to him, Vikir had no intention of eating the beans. Instead, he planned to use them in the upcoming practical exam. 5 days later, high up in the mountains, Vikir stood with a wide grin, anticipating a significant upheaval unprecedented in the clan's history. The children of the Baskerville family were subjected to rigorous training and education from a very young age. Learning to walk meant they had to run up steep mountains, and they were never allowed to lie down or rest on their stomachs. Their only sleep came with a monster corpse, conditioning them for harsh environments. This arduous journey culminated in their deadly evaluation at the age of 8. The practical evaluation was a survival exam. The young masters of the Baskerville family were gathered in a remote area of the mountain. Pavlov, the instructor, outlined the rules. Survive for a month while hunting large and strong monsters. Points were awarded based on survival, overcoming challenges, and defeating monsters, with additional points for stealing badges from others. Death resulted in 0 points, and a perfect score of 100 points was unattainable. Pavlov reminded them of Hugo's lesson that a swordsman dies when they become arrogant. He warned them to stay within the designated area, as the mountain was full of undiscovered dangers. Shadow dogs were assigned to monitor and grade the candidates. As the exam was about to begin, whispers and rumors circulated among the candidates about Vikir. Many wondered how he would fare in the practical exam, given his notorious reputation. Vikir, overhearing these murmurs, smiled to himself, recalling his knowledge of the mountain terrain. The triplets, still nursing their wounds from their recent encounter, avoided any eye contact with him. At the sound of Pavlov's bell, signaling the start of the exam, The young masters dispersed, each with their own strategy. The triplets, still bickering among themselves, were reminded that killing was discouraged, as it would lead to point deductions. Pavlov, smoking a cigarette, watched the proceedings, confident that the shadow dogs would minimize casualties. A shadow dog, tasked with observing Vikir, stealthily followed him, blending into the surroundings. The stage was set for a grueling test of survival, with Vikir ready to utilize his unique skills and cunning to outmaneuver his rivals. As the shadow dog followed Vikir, it was intrigued by his actions, anticipating a display of the skills that had earned him such a formidable reputation from a young age. Reaching a large tree with soft ground, Vikir decided it was the perfect spot to settle and take a break. The shadow dog, taken aback by his decision to rest so early in the exam, watched in disbelief as Vikir began gathering resources and building structures. It wondered if his strategy was simply to hide and avoid confrontation. After a while, Vikir left the site, with the shadow dog noting his departure. Vikir reminisced about a past lesson where he learned that cacao beans, especially the bloody beans, could make fish less smelly. Staring into the flames, he finished his preparations and decided it was time to start hunting. Around him, pits of spears were strategically placed, a testament to his survival skills. A few days passed, and Vikir ventured into the restricted area. As a former scout, he was familiar with this terrain. He detected a burning smell and discovered burning excrement, a unique characteristic of a specific monster in the area, a hellhound. The hellhound, a beast that had consumed the hellfires of the otherworld, was a formidable creature with a body engulfed in flames. Vikir had barely managed to defeat one at the age of 18 in his past life. Now, at only 8 years old, defeating it seemed impossible. However, he remembered a crucial weakness from his past experiences. Dashing towards the hellhound, Vikir exploited its limited mobility, as it could only move in straight lines, making it difficult for the creature to change direction. The hellhound was stunned when Vikir effortlessly dodged its attack. Vikir then sprayed water across the ground, exploiting another vulnerability of the hellhound, its inability to cross water. As the hellhound avoided the water, it inadvertently exposed another common canine weakness, opening its mouth while running. Vikir, anticipating this, took a step back just as the hellhound lunged at him, its mouth wide open. The moment Vikir had been waiting for had arrived. With a casual flick, he tossed something into the hellhound's mouth, deftly dodging the creature as it attempted to circle back towards him. However, the hellhound began to feel that something was terribly wrong and stumbled to the ground, whimpering in pain. The revelation came from Vikir. The chocolate he had given to the hellhound was poison to canines. Since one bloody bean could produce 100 liters of chocolate, it was the ultimate poison for the hellhound. Helpless and writhing in pain, the hellhound lay on the ground, unable to move. Vikir approached the incapacitated beast, drawing his sword and carefully selecting a target area without ribs to target its kidney. The hellhound whimpered in agony as the sword pierced its body. As Vikir delivered the final blow, a blue essence emerged from the hellhound's body. It was called XP, or karma, a substance formed when monsters were captured after energy had accumulated in their bodies, making them stronger. Vikir absorbed it, feeling the short sword he wielded becoming lighter. With a sense of accomplishment, Vikir knew he would be able to catch up to his regression state before reaching adulthood. He couldn't help but wonder about Hugo's reaction when he found out that an 8-year-old had brought back a monster with a B+ rating. With this monster, Vikir secured the first place in the practical test and had already decided on his reward, a book whose true worth only he knew. As Vikir proceeded to decapitate the hellhound's head, he suddenly sensed a presence behind him. Turning, he saw 4 more hellhounds. He speculated that they had come because of their comrades' cries, possibly seeking revenge. Excited at the prospect of facing more hellhounds, Vikir readied himself, knowing he still had more poison beans at his disposal. However, an even larger presence loomed over the hellhounds. Vikir noticed it first and believed that the hellhounds were cowering in fear due to Vikir's bloodthirst. Hellhounds were known never to submit, even if they faced certain death. Vikio, intrigued by this development, turned around and beheld a 3-headed figure, a Cerberus. The sight of the Cerberus alarmed Vikir, as it had a rating of A+, far higher than it should have been at this stage. He wondered why it had appeared here, and why it was injured, with wounds and blood dripping from its body. Upon closer examination, Vikir deduced that it had been chased and injured by the barbarian tribes across the mountain as it had entered their territory. The situation had taken an unexpected turn, and Vikir prepared himself for a challenging battle against the formidable Cerberus. Vikir recognized that this was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to hunt an injured A+ rated beast, and he was determined to seize it. He couldn't afford to let the Cerberus escape, no matter the cost. Despite hiding his true power, Vikir had already mastered the 3rd basketball technique and had achieved a high level as a sword expert. It fact, he had reached a level of mastery that most hounds only achieved when they became adults. With his blade covered in aura, Vakir dashed towards the injured Cerberus, intent on slicing one of its heads. However, the Cerberus swiftly reacted, interfering with his attack. In the heat of the moment, Vakir managed to slice one of the Cerberus's heads, realizing that killing it was indeed possible. His swordsmanship was polished, and every technique was executed with precision and efficiency, thanks to his strengthened body from the river Styx. However, reality struck hard as the Cerberus landed a devastating blow on Vakir, shattering his sword into pieces. Vakir momentarily let his guard down, resulting in a lethal claw strike from the Cerberus that sent him flying into a nearby tree. Coughing up blood, his vision went white from the impact. As he slowly regained consciousness, Vakir was surprised to find that his left arm was still intact, despite the excruciating pain. He attributed this to the effects of the river Styx. The Cerberus prepared for another attack, dashing toward him and smashing the tree to bits. Vakir leaped out of harm's way, realizing that even though his arm was intact, the damage remained, and he couldn't afford to take another hit. With the odds stacked against him, Vakir considered the situation as a test that every experienced hunter must face. He thought carefully about his next move and decided that the best course of action was to simply run away as fast as possible. The Cerberus was taken aback by his sudden retreat and chased after him. Vakir counted his lucky stars that the Cerberus was injured. Otherwise, he would have been torn apart by now. As Vakir continued to sprint away from the relentless Cerberus, his sole focus was reaching a specific location he had prepared in advance. His life depended on making it past the iron fence that marked the boundary of the restricted area. With every ounce of strength, he leaped over the iron fence, preparing himself for what lay ahead. The Cerberus was in hot pursuit, roaring loudly as it reached the iron fence, tearing it apart with its powerful jaws. The stakes were high. If Vakir was caught before reaching his prepared spot, it could spell the end for him. He dashed through the dense trees, scanning the surroundings for the pile of wood he had marked as his destination. Spotting it just ahead of a tree, he pushed his body to its limits, screaming in his mind that he was almost there. As the Cerberus closed in, Vakir knew this was the perfect moment. With the beast's jaws wide open, ready to strike, he leaped into the air. A single step forward onto a hidden marking caused it to sink into the ground. The moment Vakir landed safely on his back, the Cerberus was met with a barrage of hidden spears that had been strategically placed in the ground. It was as if it had fallen into a deadly cradle. Breathing heavily, Vakir wiped the sweat from his face, relieved that the traps he had designed for hellhounds had proven effective against the Cerberus. The spears had been coated with bloody beans, the same species as the hellhounds. The Cerberus was poisoned, its two heads coughing, vomiting, and writhing in pain. The middle head, though in agony, noticed Vakir growling at it, holding a spear aimed directly at the beast. In a final act of defiance, the Cerberus threw the spear back at Vakir, but it only bounced harmlessly off its body. Vakir then began a countdown from 7, with each step the Cerberus took, marking a second passing. Slowly, the Cerberus closed the gap between them, approaching Vakir. As the countdown reached 0, the Cerberus simply collapsed to the ground. Vakir let out a sigh of relief, knowing that the rumors about the 7 steps were true. He explained that the spear he had thrown was different. It had been laced with the poison of the bloody mamba's venom, an experience from his infancy. With the Cerberus defeated, Vakir absorbed its mana, confirming that it was truly dead this time. As Vakir stared at the Cerberus's corpse, he contemplated how to bring it back with him. However, he had another pressing matter to attend to. The presence of a Cerberus indicated the presence of a dungeon. With the gatekeeper now dead, the dungeon was free to be explored. Vakir covered himself in dried soil, rotten leaves, and moist roots, camouflaging his appearance. He backtracked the Cerberus's footprints, following them to a cave entrance. He entered the cave, knowing that it was supposed to remain undiscovered for a few more years. Deep within the cave, he could feel the mana energy beneath the surface, confirming that it had not been explored yet. The darkness within the cave seemed endless, with no source of light. Despite the darkness, Vakir was excited about the treasures that might be hidden within the dungeon. He continued to explore, noticing red veins of ruby minerals throughout the area, possibly connected to the Red All Mountain. Suddenly, he saw light up ahead, indicating the entrance to the dungeon. As he entered a large room, he saw a floating red stone at its center. The bright light emanating from the stone made him shield his eyes. Approaching the floating ruby, he noticed something behind it, a skeleton with a note. It was evident that someone had been here before him. Examining the skeleton, he saw injuries consistent with stabbings and dried bloodstains. Picking up the note from the ground, he realized that a long time had passed for the skeleton. The note, written by a member of the basketball family who preferred to be called Kane, warned future generations not to make the same mistake he did. Kane explained that the stone chamber was a legend within the family, and he and his brother Abel had stumbled upon it during a raid on the dungeon. They had killed many monsters and had eventually reached the chamber, where they found the final assignment. The assignment had bound them to the chamber for 3 long years. Vakir couldn't believe that they had endured for 3 years, indicating their determination to obtain the treasure. The note revealed that the final assignment was somewhere in the chamber. As Vakir examined the stand of the floating ruby, he saw an inscription. When entering, it's 1, but once inside, it's 2. When leaving, it's 1. This riddle left him puzzled. The note continued with Cain and Abel contemplating the enigmatic text. They realized that as twins, they were once 1 in their mother's womb, but had become 2 upon birth. To obtain the treasure, they had to become 1 again, and only one of them could leave with the coveted prize. After a fierce battle, Cain killed his brother in the stone chamber, leaving only one of them alive. However, there was no change in the chamber, and the expected treasure did not appear. Cain was perplexed by the lack of a reward. Despite killing his own brother, he screamed in frustration and decided to leave, with the intention of warning others who might discover this place to stay away. He believed that the Devil's Den only existed to taunt humans. As Vakir reflected on Cain's story, he concluded that the brothers had misinterpreted the riddle. Since he had no twin, he believed that the answer to the riddle lay within the dungeon. He realized that the brothers had been unlucky due to being twins, and he had an idea. Vakir contemplated the riddle once more and realized that the answer lay in shadows. He explained that when he entered the dungeon, he was 1, but as soon as the ruby's light cast a shadow, he became 2. With this understanding, he smashed the ruby into pieces, plunging the chamber into darkness. This action triggered the opening of the final stage of the dungeon. The pieces of the shattered ruby began to rise and release energy, opening a passageway in front of Vakir. He smiled happily as the final stage revealed a sword, the relic of the Devil's Den. The sword was named Beelzebub and had an evil aura. It bore the inscription that only those with Baskerville's blood could wield it. Vakir was shocked to discover that the sword was Beelzebub, which was associated with the gluttonous fly Beelzebub from old legends. The sword had been part of the Devil's holy constellation called the 7 Calamities, and had caused countless deaths when taken by the demon clans. With excitement, Vakir grabbed the sword, declaring that it would not cause such calamities again. The sword exuded a ferocious energy, and as he held it, it seemed to become a part of his arm. Vakir felt lucky to possess a blade from a Devil's holy constellation. As he prepared to leave the chamber, Vakir suddenly felt something wrong with his body. He stumbled to the ground, realizing that he was hungry. The blade, Beelzebub, made a noise, suggesting that it wanted to consume something. Following the sword's direction, he reached the corpse of the hellhound he had killed earlier. Beelzebub extended a tube into the hellhound's corpse, absorbing its blood. Vakir felt his body returning to normal as his hunger subsided. He hoped that the mountain's dried condition wasn't due to the sword's hunger. Beelzebub had absorbed the hellhound's ability, which Vakir identified as hemorrhage. It seemed that Beelzebub could absorb its enemy's skills as its own, although it had a limit of 3 skills for now. After absorbing the abilities of the hellhound and the sewer rat, Vakir discovered the hellhound's skill, which constantly pumped out the blood of its opponent, even through the smallest wounds. Realizing his newfound ability to steal skills, Vakir looked at the Cerberus corpse and noticed Beelzebub's excitement at the thought of feeding on it. However, Vakir warned Beelzebub that it couldn't eat all of it due to the Cerberus being too damaged. He thought silently about how to explain this during the autopsy. Beelzebub, eager to consume, made constant noises, but Vakir slapped it, indicating that it had consumed enough. Beelzebub was upset, but had gained 2 new skills, including the power of the sewer rat beneath the Cerberus. Vakir picked up the rat, pleased with the many powerful skills he had absorbed. Afterward, Vakir decided to wait at the practical exam site. Having finished preparing the monster, the young hounds had gathered, each covered in various injuries from their hunts. They would receive rewards such as shields, swords, or necklaces based on the parts they had produced from the monsters they hunted during the practical exam. Before we continue, let's take a moment to shout out at Curtis Vaughn 3578, who commented, "Can we please get more parts on our useless school life video? Thanks for commenting." As the monster parts were laid on the table, the senior members were astonished at what Vakir had hunted. Hugo, upon hearing the news, was alarmed and questioned Barrymore about the details. Barrymore reported that Vakir had accidentally crossed over to the restricted area during the exam and had hunted a wounded Cerberus, applying poison to his wooden spear. Hugo was curious about the poison that could kill a Cerberus and where Vakir had obtained it. Barrymore mentioned that the report lacked such details and wanted to ask Vakir directly. However, Vakir had returned to the dorm, exhausted from the hunt. Hugo complimented Vakir for his resourcefulness and stated that information was power and power determined one's worth. Barrymore was surprised by Hugo's lack of discrimination based on bloodline and pondered whether Hugo was thinking of his second son, who was preparing for isolation training. When Vakir was summoned, he stood before Hugo and Barrymore with a smile on his face. Hugo questioned him about how he had caught the Cerberus during the exam. Fakir explained that he had placed chocolate on his wooden spear, which was lethal to canine monsters. Hugo inquired if that was the reason he had asked for chocolate before, to which Fakir confirmed. Barrymore couldn't help but wonder if this was how fathers and sons typically conversed. Hugo further asked why Fakir hadn't responded when the butler had questioned him about the hunt. Fakir replied that his master was the master of the clan. Hugo was satisfied with the response and rewarded Fakir with the monster's corpse and granted him a wish. Fakir wished for access to the 10,000 Epistle Library, which was one of the largest libraries in the Empire, located deep within the heart of the Baskerville clan. Hugo was surprised as only the Patriarch, the second in command, and their direct descendants were allowed to enter. However, Hugo granted him access, and Fakir asked to read the 6th technique of the family located within the 6th restricted zone. Hugo granted him permission, and Fakir was stunned by the opportunity to learn a technique that even illegitimate children were not allowed to. He recalled Hugo's current level at the 7th technique and his past life's discrimination. Fakir vowed to surpass Hugo in this life and obtain the greatest essence of basketball, a textbook containing the teachings of the first patriarch who had subjugated the 7 great disasters. Hugo looked forward to Fakir's progress and wished him luck, to which Fakir bowed his head in gratitude, promising to surpass Hugo's expectations. What will happen next? Find out next time by staying tuned for our future recaps. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more great recaps.